Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking an incredibly ambitious and thought-provoking text by engineering scholar Othmane Wagdi. It's called The Great Reconciliation, and it outlines what the author describes as a grand unified theory for the third millennium. Now, this isn't just your standard critique of modern life. It's a completely comprehensive, holistic diagnosis of our current existential crisis, blending history, biology, and even civil engineering into one massive picture. I am so excited to guide you through this material today because Wagdi offers this genuinely fascinating framework for understanding exactly why our modern society feels the way it does. Okay, let's dive into this by looking at the core question driving this entire explainer. Wagdi asks, why does our modern world feel so biologically off course, even though we have all this amazing advanced knowledge and technology? I mean, we've built absolute miracles of engineering, right? High-tech cities, hyper-connected networks. Yet, so many of us are haunted by this persistent brain fog. In fact, studies show that modern city dwellers spend roughly 90% of their lives indoors. That is huge, and it contributes to this crushing feeling of alienation and a deep sense that we're constantly self-sabotaging. To answer why, Wagdi insists we have to look really closely at our biological and psychological roots. But before we can get to the objective science and the logic of this diagnosis, we really have to look through a subjective lens. This is Othmane Wagdi at the Mainz Citadel in Germany. Wagdi is a bridge builder both literally as an engineer and metaphorically. He makes it clear that to formalize this highly complex, generalistic diagnosis of our current state of being, he had to draw on his own deeply personal life path. Finding the exact knowledge elements necessary for this book required him to tell his own story. His subjective experiences were an absolute necessity to decode the science. Here, we can really map out the crucible of his journey. Wagdi's perspective was forged in two wildly different landscapes. On one side, you have Mohammedia in Morocco, the south. It's a place pulsating with raw energy, deeply connected to our fossil inheritance in the world of mythos. On the absolute other side, you have Mainz in Germany, the north. This is a sanctuary of refined intellect, hyper-efficient engineering, and strict scientific logos. Moving back and forth between the Atlantic shores of Morocco and the industrial heart of Germany allowed him to see this stark contrast between a world that honors natural rhythms and one built entirely as a masterpiece of the intellect. To help us wrap our heads around this complex internal war, Wagdi uses some incredibly powerful visual metaphors, basically fables of the human condition. We see the stork, the canary, the emerging butterfly, the child, and the orca. As an engineer obsessed with how systems operate, Wagdi realized that our modern cities might be technically flawless, but they are literally starving our natural biological instincts. Let's look closely at the two most crucial fables he uses to explain this. So, the crucial point here is how these animals represent our deeply conflicted human condition, drawing directly on the biological theories of Jeremy Griffith. First, we have Adam Stork. Imagine a stork who, for the very first time, develops an intellect and decides to fly off course, completely defying the perfect, selfless instincts encoded in his DNA so he can experiment and explore. Wagdi compares himself directly to this stork, leaving his flock in the south to go explore the intellectual logic of the north. But in doing so, the stork feels a crushing subconscious guilt. Then we have the canary in the coal mine. Wagdi describes feeling exactly like this canary while working in the highly refined German energy and engineering sectors. He was totally fluent in the language of the North, but he felt a profound urban neurosis and alienation. He was living in this highly efficient society that was psychologically freezing cold, an environment where the air for our natural instincts was quite literally thinning out. Section 1. Zombies, Vampires, and Decay. Let's explore how all this builds into the author's objective diagnosis of our modern ecological state. To understand this decay, we have to look at some pretty chilling terminology Wagdi uses. The first term is zombies. Now listen, I want to make it incredibly clear right here on our first use. Wagdi is not talking about fictional movie monsters. No way. He is deliberately using this term objectively as a severe warning about a state of being that is a direct result of species decay. Drawing on geneticist Michael Niels, Wagdi explains that the chronic stress, noise, and artificial nature of the modern concrete grid put our bodies into a constant fight-or-flight state. This biological intoxication actually shuts down our conscious critical system 2 thinking. It leaves us as easily manipulated, reactive processors, zombies, essentially who just follow orders and maintain the grid on autopilot without ever questioning the damage we're doing. And that brings us to the second term, vampires. Again, this is a deliberate, objective warning. When our environment suppresses our conscious logic and starves our mammalian empathy, what takes over? Our primitive reptilian brain. Wagdi defines the vampire archetype as an individual with a high intellect but absolutely zero heart. They are driven purely by the need to consume, secure hierarchical rank, and control resources. We probably all had a boss exactly like that at some point, right? But this is a much deeper warning of habitat-induced decay. It happens when our natural intelligence is completely edited out by the very cities we built. Which leads us directly to the physical manifestation of this decay, what Wagdi calls the misplaced footprint. In our intellectual arrogance, and while trapped in this thoughtless zombie state, we have paved over river deltas, fertile floodplains, and coastal swamps. We've basically choked the Earth's vital organs just to build static concrete prisons. And what's really terrifying is what Wagdi points out about the banality of evil. You see, the destruction of our environment isn't mostly driven by people who actively hate the Earth. No, it's driven by good people, bureaucrats and engineers simply doing their jobs, following spreadsheets, and exhausting our one-time fossil fuel inheritance because their conscious thinking has been totally shut down by the system. To truly understand the depth of this darkness, let's read this powerful quote from biologist Jeremy Griffith. Wagdi highlights this as totally central to his diagnosis. He says, "Alienation is the most horrific of all states. It is a living death. We are all so profoundly alienated now that we are effectively living a dead existence." Wow, that perfectly captures the brain fog, the total lack of intuition, and the sheer biological grief that plagues the modern urbanite who has been completely severed from the sun, the soil, and our natural rhythms. If we don't change course, Wagdi warns us of what he calls the transhumanist trap. And you guys, this is a dark, ugly, mechanized end to the natural man. It's a future where artificial grids entirely replace any intuitive harmony, and where we just try to fix our deep biological void with more and more technology, ultimately leading to mass psychosis and a living death. He views the absolute insistence that we must all live in this destructive, neurotic model as a literal form of global biological genocide, completely detaching us from any sense of the divine or natural order. Section 2, Dawn of Regenerative Existence. But hey, identifying the sickness is the first step toward the cure, right? After all that darkness, the light truly shines on the eastern horizon of the book. Wagdi points us toward a breathtaking physical escape from this archipelago of thoughtlessness. He introduces the garden generator concept and his incredible initiative called Kasbah 3000. It's an eco-village that perfectly marries our heritage with high-tech innovation. Instead of a concrete cage, this is a holistic settlement actively designed to restore our biological off-switch. By rescaling our communities and stepping back into the daily stewardship of our environment, we finally silence our reptilian fears and allow our mammalian empathy to flourish once again. Wagdi calls this glorious blueprint the arc of the third millennium. It is a profound shift from self-destruction to self-understanding. It's all about embracing a regenerative existence, where we use our immense intellect not to destroy the world, but to finally protect our ancient instincts. It envisions humanity completely shedding its destructive habits and stepping up to our rightful place as a true keystone species, actively restoring our nurturing planet. The ultimate goal here? To rescale society so that it is populated by naturally moral human beings, initiating an era of 1,000 years of peace into the future. It is just an incredibly hopeful horizon. And that, my friends, brings us to the crossroads. Wagdi leaves us with this massively provocative final thought. Will we succumb to the metallic noise of the machine and fall into the mechanized trap? Or will we awaken our conscious intellects, step out of the coal mine, and actually plant the garden for a millennium of peace? It's a stark choice between the banality of evil and the sublimity of thought. Wagdi's incredible framework challenges every single one of us to consider our own role in this great reconciliation. I highly, highly encourage you to read the full text to explore the deep Trek engineering solutions he proposes. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and thanks so much for joining me on this explainer.